Good morning, students. I'm HP Shrimal, Assistant Professor of English, Government College, Manglana. How are you? I hope you are doing well with these e-content lectures. Today we are going to take up the next part of the essay, Meditations in Westminster Abbey by Joseph Addison. Dear students, in the previous lecture we have read why Addison used to go to Westminster Abbey, what two particular things he saw in the inscriptions on the tombstones, and what was the significance of writing only two things. Let's begin today. Addison further writes, I began to consider with myself what innumerable multitudes of people lay confused together under the pavement of that ancient cathedral. How men and women, friends and enemies, priests and soldiers, monks and prebendaries were crumbled amongst one another and blended together in the same common mass. How beauty, strength, and youth, with old age, weakness, and deformity, lay undistinguished in the same promiscuous heap of matter. Is that right? The gist of the passage is that he reflects how death, removes all feelings of distinction, how death levels each and everyone. He says that in the churchyard he saw innumerable multitudes of people, innumerable number of people, great number of people lay confused because so many people were buried there. And that's why he says innumerable people were buried there and their dead bodies lay confused together under the pavement of that ancient cathedral, ancient church. Was that right? How men and women, friends and enemies, priests and soldiers, monks and prebendaries were crumbled amongst one another. He says, without distinction, men and women, friends and foes, priests and soldiers, monks and prebendaries, prebendaries means clergymen, were crumbled amongst one another. Crumble means disintegrate, broken to pieces there and blended together in the same common mass. Blended means mixed together in the same common mass, that is soil, dust. Their dead bodies were buried there without any distinction, and after the burial, they mix up. Their dead bodies disintegrate and mix up in the dust. How beauty, strength, and youth. On the one hand, there is beauty, strength, and youth, and on the other hand, there is old age, weakness, and deformity. They have mixed together, they have lost their distinction. Lay undistinguished, without distinction, in the same promiscuous heap. Promiscuous heap means confused heap, haphazard heap, indiscriminate heap of matter. That is soil. Have you got the point? That is to say, after death, all ideas, all feelings of distinction vanish, disappear, man become equal, and they are buried in the same dust. He further says, some of them, he looked at the monuments there, and then he records, some of them, that is monuments, were covered with such extravagant epitaphs that if it were possible for the dead person to be acquainted with them, he would blush at the praises which his friends have bestowed upon him. Some of the monuments were covered with such extravagant epitaphs. Extravagant means elaborated, ornamented, exaggerated. Epitaphs. Epitaphs means inscriptions. Have you got the point? That's why he says that when he went through the inscriptions, he found that some of the monuments were covered with exaggerated praises. Isn't that exaggerated? So exaggerated praises that if it were possible for the dead person to be acquainted with me. Acquainted means to be made familiar with them. If the dead person could come to know what praises were showered on him, he would blush at the praises. He would himself feel embarrassed, which his friends have bestowed upon him. Bestowed means conferred. Conferred. That's why he says, if it were possible for the dead person to come back and look at the praises showered or conferred upon him by the friends, he would blush, he would feel embarrassed because the praises were so exaggerated. Is that right? Now he further says, there are others so excessively modest that they deliver the character of the person departed in Greek or Hebrew, and by that means are not understood once in a 12-month. On the other hand, he saw some monuments in which the inscriptions were written in Greek or Hebrew language, and not many people know how to read and understand Greek or Hebrew. That is why these inscriptions were read and understood very rarely. Is that right? That's why he says there are others so excessively modest that they are so modest, so shy that they deliver the character of the person departed in Greek or Hebrew. That they describe the dead person in two alien languages for the English, that they are Greek and Hebrew, and not many people can understand and read these languages. That's why the inscriptions were read once in 12 months. Have you got the point? Further, he says that in the poetical quarter, I found there were poets who had no monuments and monuments which had no poets. This is the politics. You feel that in the poetical quarters, he found that if there were some poets buried, then there were no monuments. And if he saw monuments, then there were no poets. Have you got the point? There is a quarter in the, in Westminster Abbey, there is a quarter in which only poets could be buried. But unfortunately, some less known poets sometimes are buried there, and because of some political or social influence, they are buried there. And if they are buried there, you can see the magnificent monuments on their tomb because they were influential people. And some well-known poets, being poor or having less social influence, they are buried there, but they do not have any monument there. And that's why he says, in the poetical quarter, I found there were poets who had no monuments and monuments which had no poets. Have you got the point? Now see the next. He says, as a foreigner is very apt to conceive an idea of the ignorance or a politeness of a nation from the turn of their public monuments and inscriptions that should be submitted to the perusal of men of learning and genius before they are put in execution. As a foreigner is very apt to conceive an idea of the ignorance or politeness of a nation. When a foreigner comes to visit your churchyard, he fabricates the idea of the ignorance or politeness of that country from the turn of their public monuments, from looking at their monuments, reading the inscriptions on their monuments, etc. And that's why Edison advises that these inscriptions should be submitted to the perusal. Perusal means reading of the men of learning and genius before they are put in execution, before they are written and engraved in the stones or in brass, in marble. These inscriptions should be sent to the intellectuals for their reading, so that there could not be any mistake, any error, any weakness. And to remove these errors, weaknesses, or mistakes, they should be submitted to the intelligent scholars for their perusal. Is that right? Thank you. This is all for today. We shall take up the next part in the next lecture. Keep reading, enjoy reading,